They say trust is the foundation of every relationship. I used to believe that without ever questioning it, until the night I learned how fragile trust really is. The evening had been unremarkable, one of those quiet nights where everything feels almost too normal. I was stretched out on the couch, half reading through work emails, half listening to the dull hum of the television in the background. The kind of night where nothing stands out, nothing lingers. At least, that's what I thought. Her phone was lying on the coffee table, face down, but buzzing every now and then with little vibrations that cut through the silence. Normally, I wouldn't even look at it. We had an unspoken rule: we didn't snoop, we didn't check, we trusted. That was us, or at least, that's what I thought we were. Then the screen lit up, and I saw it. An Instagram notification. Nothing strange about that in itself. She was active online, always sharing photos of her coffee, her books, little snapshots of her day. But what caught me wasn't the app, it was the name. It wasn't one of her girlfriends, the usual faces I'd come to recognize after years together. It wasn't her cousin, her co-workers, or the random acquaintances who liked her posts. It was a man's name. Someone unfamiliar. And in that single second, curiosity slipped into me like a crack in the wall, widening fast, unstoppable. I told myself it was nothing. Just a message. Just a harmless ping. But that voice inside me, the one I didn't want to listen to, kept whispering. Check it. Just once. What's the harm in knowing? My hand moved before my better judgment could stop it. One swipe, one small decision, and suddenly I was holding her phone. My heart was thudding, hard and uneven, as though even it knew I was about to stumble into something I could never unsee. I didn't have to search long. It wasn't hidden in some locked folder, wasn't disguised behind passwords. No. It was right there, sitting in her photo gallery as if it belonged, as if it had every right to exist in her world. The pictures hit me like a punch to the gut. There she was, my girlfriend, the woman who told me she loved me every morning, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Not the tired, polite smile she gave me after long days, not the distracted half-smiles when she scrolled through her phone. This was different. Brighter. Lighter. She was glowing. And she wasn't glowing for me. She was with him. Some guy I had never seen before. His arm around her shoulders. Her leaning into his chest. Both of them laughing at some private joke that I wasn't a part of. Frame after frame, moment after moment, frozen in her camera roll, telling me a story I didn't want to believe. My throat tightened as I scrolled, my fingers numb. These weren't old photos from before we met. That might have been easier, something I could explain away. No, these were fresh. Recent. I recognized the dates in the corner, knew exactly where I had been at the time. At work. Pushing myself to make more money, to build the life I thought we both dreamed of. While I was busy planning a future, she was already living in someone else's present. I remember staring at one picture in particular. She was sitting across from him at some cafe, her hand on the table, his hand just inches away. The look on her face, it wasn't just happiness. It was intimacy. It was comfort. It was the kind of expression she used to reserve for me, back when things felt simple, back when I believed we were unshakable. The lamp in the corner of the living room cast a weak, yellow glow over everything, and for the first time, our home felt foreign. I sat there with her phone in my hand, surrounded by walls that had once felt safe, and suddenly they felt like strangers closing in on me. My chest caved in with the weight of it all, and I couldn't breathe. She swore she loved me. She said it casually, sometimes absent-mindedly, but always with enough conviction that I never questioned it. Every morning, every night, I love you. Those 3 words had been my anchor. But those photos told a story my heart wasn't ready for. They whispered a truth that cut deeper than any argument ever could. And in that moment, sitting in the dim light, her laughter echoing silently from the images on her phone, I realized something I'd never wanted to: love isn't always enough. That night was the beginning. The moment everything shifted. The second my world tilted on its axis and I fell into the kind of darkness you can't prepare for. And that's where it all began. My name's Daniel, though most people just call me Dan. I'm 35, living in the suburbs outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. To most people, my life probably looks pretty ordinary: 2-bedroom house, a reliable car, and a job that pays the bills. I work in IT at a mid-sized insurance company. It's not glamorous. It's the kind of job where the highlight of your day is fixing something before anyone else notices it was broken. It keeps the lights on, keeps food in the fridge, but it doesn't exactly set your soul on fire. Maybe that's why Emily stood out so much to me when I met her. She was the opposite of everything I thought my life was. It happened about 5 years ago. I was at this little coffee shop downtown. I'd gone there for a client meeting that got cancelled at the last minute. Normally, I would have just packed up and gone home, but something made me stay. I figured I'd order a drink, pull out my laptop, and get some work done while I was already there. She came in like she owned the room. Not in an arrogant way, just radiant. She was talking on the phone, too loudly for such a small place, going on about an art exhibit she wanted to see. There was this spark in her voice, like every word carried its own kind of enthusiasm. She had on this flowy skirt, a paint-stained tote bag slung over her shoulder, and hair that seemed to have a mind of its own. Emily. She ordered a cappuccino, sat 2 tables over from me, and pulled out a sketchpad. I remember watching her tuck her hair behind her ear as she bent over the page, completely absorbed in what she was doing. I'm not the kind of guy who usually makes bold moves. I'm the type who keeps to himself, doesn't rock the boat. But there was something about her that day, something that made me want to cross the invisible line I usually stay behind. So, I asked her what she was drawing. Just a simple question. That turned into 2 hours of conversation. She showed me her sketches, told me about the murals she'd been working on, about her dream of one day opening her own gallery. We talked about everything and nothing, music, movies, the weird things people say when they think no one's listening. It felt easy, like we'd known each other for years instead of minutes. From that day on, we were inseparable. Emily had this bohemian energy about her. She was always chasing something, sunsets, inspiration, the next adventure. Life, to her, was this giant canvas waiting for color, waiting for her brush. I was more grounded, more practical. She told me once that I was the anchor to her sail. I liked that. It felt like we balanced each other out, her spirit of adventure tethered to my stability, my caution softened by her daring. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Nothing fancy, no grand gestures. Just us, back at that same coffee shop where it all started. I remember fumbling with the ring in my pocket, nervous in a way I hadn't been since our first date. When I finally asked, her eyes filled with tears. She said yes before I even finished the question, hugging me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. For a while, life was good. Really good. Marriage wasn't without its challenges, of course. Her work as a freelance artist meant her income came in waves, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes not at all. My 9-to-5 was steady but uninspiring. We agreed early on that I'd cover most of the bills, and she'd pitch in when she could. Money was tight at times, but we always managed to figure it out. Our weekends became our little escapes, farmers markets, spontaneous road trips to the beach or the mountains, late-night marathons of Netflix shows we both pretended not to fall asleep to. She had this habit of dragging me to places I never would have gone on my own, art fairs, quirky roadside diners, parks I'd driven past 100 times without noticing. With her, even the ordinary felt a little more alive. I thought we were happy. I really did. Sure, we argued sometimes. About money, mostly. About how much time I spent at work. About how she wanted me to be more spontaneous, less rigid in my routines. She used to get frustrated when I'd choose a quiet night at home over some last-minute adventure she'd dreamed up. But I figured every couple argued. It was normal. And despite the fights, we always seemed to find our way back to each other. She'd curl up next to me in bed, her head on my shoulder, and whisper, "I love you." It was the same every night. 3 simple words that made me believe, without hesitation, that whatever rough patches we hit, we'd weather them together. Looking back now, I realize how much I took those words at face value. How much I wanted them to be true. Emily was magnetic. People were drawn to her, her energy, her laughter, the way she made everyone feel like the most important person in the room. She thrived on attention, on connection. And while I admired that about her, I sometimes wondered if I was enough to keep her interest. She'd never given me a reason to doubt her, not really, but the thought lingered in the back of my mind. I pushed it aside. After all, she chose me, didn't she? Out of everyone, she chose me. Our 5th anniversary was coming up when everything started to shift. I had been working extra hours, trying to save up for a surprise trip to Asheville, a place she'd always talked about visiting. I wanted to give her something special, something that showed I was listening, that I cared about her dreams as much as mine. But the more I worked, the more distance I felt between us. She'd stay out later, sometimes saying she was at a gallery opening or meeting friends. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. Until I couldn't. At the time, I chalked up the changes to life. People get busy, relationships go through phases. I convinced myself we were just in a rut, that once the stress eased up, we'd find our rhythm again. I had no idea how wrong I was. That belief shattered the night I saw those photos. At first, my brain scrambled to build excuses. Maybe they were old friends she'd reconnected with. Maybe it was part of some art project. Maybe, just maybe, I was overthinking. I wanted so badly for there to be an explanation that didn't involve betrayal. But the more I scrolled, the harder it was to lie to myself. There were selfies of them at a brewery, her leaning into him with that easy smile she hadn't given me in months. Shots of him with his arm around her waist like he belonged there. Even a couple of blurry nighttime pictures that screamed intimacy, the kind of closeness you don't fake. By the time I looked up from the screen, my chest felt like it was caving in. My pulse was pounding in my ears when I heard the bathroom door open. She walked into the living room, fresh out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me sitting there with her phone in my hands. Her face shifted in an instant. Surprise, then fear, then something colder. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp, almost defensive. I couldn't even find the words at first. My throat was dry. Finally, I held up the phone, my hand trembling. "Emily, who is he?" Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. For just a second, I caught it, guilt, raw and undeniable, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She straightened her posture, crossed her arms. "Why are you going through my phone, Dan? Do you not trust me?" My heart sank. That was her move, deflect, redirect, put me on trial instead. "Don't do that," I said, my voice breaking. "Don't turn this around on me. Just tell me. Who is he?" She huffed, adjusting the towel around her shoulders. "He's a friend. Just a friend. You're overreacting." But no one takes photos like that with just a friend. That night spiraled into the first of many arguments. I pressed for answers, she dodged and weaved, alternating between anger and dismissal. She swore nothing was going on, that I was paranoid, insecure. And maybe I was, but those pictures were seared into my brain. From that night forward, something cracked between us. I noticed every little thing. The way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. How she suddenly had more art shows and late nights at the studio. How her eyes lit up at texts she quickly turned the screen away from. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Work became unbearable. I'd sit in my cubicle, staring at lines of code that blurred together, my mind spiraling into endless questions. Was she with him right then? Were they laughing about some inside joke, touching hands under a cafe table? Every notification sound made my stomach twist. At night, I stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., the room dark and silent except for the sound of her breathing beside me. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was dreaming of me or him. When I tried to bring it up again, it never went well. Sometimes she exploded, shouting that I was suffocating her with accusations. Other times she'd crumble into tears, clutching my hands and swearing up and down that she loved me, that I was her everything. I remember one night vividly. We were in the kitchen, dishes still piled in the sink, when I asked her point blank, "Emily, are you cheating on me?" She froze, then set the glass in her hand down on the counter. Slowly, she walked over, put both hands on my face, and stared into my eyes. "Dan," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound real, "you are my world. Do you hear me? My world." And I wanted to believe her so badly. God, I wanted to. My chest ached with the desire to accept those words as truth, to erase the images from my mind, to convince myself that everything was okay. But the photos were burned into me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smiling in his arms. The weeks that followed were hell. Conversations turned into arguments. Arguments turned into silences that lasted days. We still slept in the same bed, still played the part of a normal couple when friends invited us out, but behind closed doors, everything was fractured. Her phone became the elephant in every room. She carried it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She changed her lock screen password. When I asked why, she said she needed privacy. I told her privacy and secrecy aren't the same thing. She rolled her eyes and walked away. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting. After all, she never admitted to anything. Maybe it really was innocent. But then I'd catch a glimpse of that smile, the one she used to save for me, now directed at her phone, and the pit in my stomach would return with a vengeance. My friends noticed the change in me. One of my coworkers, Steve, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You alright, man? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." I shrugged it off, told him I was fine, just stressed. But the truth was, I was unraveling. Emily, meanwhile, seemed lighter. Like a weight had been lifted off her. She dressed up more, put on lipstick just to run errands, laughed at things I didn't understand. It was as though she was living two lives, and I was stuck in the one that felt grey and empty. One Saturday, she said she was going to an art show downtown. I asked if I could come. She hesitated, just long enough to sting, before forcing a smile. "It's just a small thing, babe. Boring. You wouldn't like it." But she came home hours later, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I confronted her again, this time angrier. She screamed back, called me controlling, said I was trying to cage her spirit. "I can't breathe around you anymore," she yelled. "You're suffocating me with your mistrust." I wanted to shout that she was the one killing me, one lie at a time. But instead, I just stood there, silent, because part of me was terrified of her answer if I pushed too far. The gaslighting became constant. If I asked about the guy in the photos, she'd laugh bitterly and say, "Still stuck on that? God, Dan, you really don't trust me at all, do you?" If I showed hurt, she'd turn it into my flaw. If I asked questions, I was paranoid. If I stayed quiet, I was cold. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Was I crazy? Was I inventing things that weren't there? Or was she simply that good at covering her tracks? Nights turned into battlegrounds. Sometimes we'd lie in bed back to back, not touching, the silence screaming louder than any fight. Other nights, she'd roll over, curl into me, and whisper apologies I didn't know whether to believe. But the truth was, the photos never left me. They lived in my mind, replaying like a slideshow of betrayal. No matter how hard she cried, no matter how sweetly she said my name, I couldn't erase the image of her in his arms. That was the cruelest part. I still loved her. Despite everything, despite the lies, despite the suspicion eating me alive, I loved her. And that love kept me stuck. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I'd left work early one Friday, determined to surprise her. It had been gnawing at me, the distance between us, the awkward silences, the way her phone seemed permanently glued to her hand. I thought maybe if I reminded her of us, the simple things, the things that used to make us happy, we could find our way back. So I picked up takeout from her favorite Thai place, the pad see ew with extra broccoli she always ordered. I even stopped by the liquor store and bought a bottle of that red wine she liked, the one I always teased her about because it was more expensive than my entire dinner. I drove home with a stupid grin on my face, imagining the look on hers when she saw the spread waiting for her. Her car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't unusual. I figured she was running errands, maybe picking up flowers like she sometimes did on Fridays. But when I carried the food inside, something caught my eye. Her sketchpad was on the coffee table, open to a half-finished drawing. It was a man's face. Not just any man. The man from the photos. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. The resemblance was undeniable, his jawline, the way his hair fell across his forehead, even the faint scar above his right eyebrow. She had captured him in a way she hadn't captured me in years. My face was never in her sketchbook anymore. I used to be. Back when she couldn't stop drawing me. I set the food down, my hands trembling, and sank onto the couch. For a long moment, I just stared at it, the lines, the shading, the attention she had given to details of another man. I couldn't look away. It was like staring at the embodiment of my worst fear. The food grew cold beside me. The wine sat unopened. Then I heard her car pull up. Her footsteps on the gravel. The jingle of her keys as she unlocked the door. She came in carrying grocery bags, humming under her breath, that light little tune she always hummed when she was in a good mood. And then she saw me holding her sketchpad like evidence in a trial. Her humming died instantly. "Emily," I said. My voice was hoarse, shaking. "Tell me the truth. Please." For a second, she froze. Her eyes darted from me to the sketchpad, then back. Her knuckles whitened around the grocery bags. I could see the panic in her face, the calculation. But then something in her crumbled. She set the bags down slowly, almost delicately, like she was afraid of making noise, and sank onto the couch across from me. She covered her face with her hands and started sobbing. I had imagined this moment 100 times, how I would feel, what I would say, whether I'd scream or stay silent. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the real thing. For the sight of the woman I loved, the woman I'd built my entire life around, folded in on herself and breaking apart before my eyes. Her silence told me everything. She didn't deny it. Didn't even try. Through choked tears, she whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely, Dan. You're always working, always tired. He made me feel alive. Alive. That single word cut deeper than any knife ever could. Alive. As if life with me had been nothing but slow suffocation. As if all the nights I stayed late at work were some betrayal against her, instead of me trying to provide for us. As if love, marriage, history, weren't enough. Alive? My voice cracked. Wasn't I enough for you? Wasn't our life enough? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not that. I love you, I swear I do. But with him, it was different. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I laughed then, a harsh, bitter sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. It just happened? You accidentally fell into his arms? You accidentally took those pictures? You accidentally let him into our lives? Dan, please. Don't. Don't you dare. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the sketchpad. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? She reached out like she wanted to touch me, to calm me, but I recoiled. The thought of her hands, the same hands that had traced his face in that sketch, the same hands that had touched him, it made me sick. We fought. God, did we fight? The words came out like shrapnel, tearing through both of us. I yelled until my throat was raw, demanded to know how long it had been going on, where they met, what he gave her that I didn't. She cried until her eyes swelled shut, swore it was just physical, swore she'd end it if I gave her another chance. But the photos wouldn't leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Saw her smile, the smile she used to give me, shining in his direction. Saw his arm around her, her body leaning into his. Saw what I had lost. You still love me, she sobbed. I know you do. Please, don't throw us away. Don't throw me away. It was a mistake, it doesn't have to mean anything. I stared at her, my chest heaving, my hands balled into fists. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if I loved her anymore. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep beside her. For the first time since we got married, I dragged a blanket to the couch and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her muffled sobs through the bedroom wall. But sleep didn't come. My mind raced in circles, replaying every moment of our relationship like a cruel highlight reel, our first date, our wedding vows, the night we moved into this house. And then, cutting through all of it, the photos. Her laughter, but not with me. Her touch, but not on me. At some point, I sat up, pressing my palms to my eyes so hard I saw stars. The clock read 3:17 a.m. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood, but in my head there was nothing but noise. When the sun rose, I was still on the couch, stiff and aching. Emily appeared in the doorway, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes red and swollen. She looked so small, so fragile, like the woman I married had been hollowed out and replaced by someone else. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Dan, Don't, I muttered, standing and brushing past her toward the kitchen. I can't do this right now. She reached for me, desperate, but I pulled away again. Her touch felt like fire. We spent that whole Saturday circling each other like strangers. She hovered in the kitchen, tried to cook breakfast, then abandoned it when I wouldn't sit with her. I buried myself in pointless chores, mowing the lawn, scrubbing the bathroom, reorganizing tools I hadn't touched in months, anything to avoid looking at her. But every corner of the house was hers. Every picture frame, every shared mug, every memory soaked into the walls. There was no escape. By nightfall, we hadn't spoken more than a handful of words. The silence was suffocating, heavier than the shouting had been. And when I looked at her across the room, sitting curled up on the couch with that same sketchpad closed on her lap, I realized something terrifying. Even if she ended it with him. Even if she begged for forgiveness every single day. Even if I tried with every ounce of strength I had left. I wasn't sure I could ever look at her again without seeing him. The weeks that followed were a blur of anger, grief, and confusion. She begged me to go to therapy with her, to try to rebuild. She wrote long messages at 2 a.m. about how she'd failed me, how she would spend the rest of her life making it up if only I'd give her the chance. And part of me wanted to. 5 years together isn't easy to throw away. We had a history, a rhythm, memories woven into the smallest corners of our lives. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to tell her something funny, forgetting for a moment that the us I wanted to share it with no longer existed. But another part of me, the part that still saw those photos when I blinked, knew something had shattered beyond repair. So, I moved out. The decision felt like cutting off a limb. One morning, while she was at work, I packed my clothes, my books, and a few boxes of things I couldn't bear to leave behind. Loading them into the back of my car felt surreal. I half expected her to come home early, to stop me, to beg again. But she didn't. I drove away, leaving the house we once dreamed of filling with kids and laughter, and headed toward an unfamiliar skyline. My new place was a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and thin walls that let in every sound from my neighbors, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I lay awake on a mattress without a bed frame, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Emily texted me almost every day at first. Sometimes she'd apologize. Sometimes she'd beg. Sometimes she'd lash out, accusing me of abandoning her, of giving up too easily. Once, she even showed up outside the apartment, crying in the rain, asking me to let her in. I didn't. Eventually, the messages slowed, then stopped. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I almost called her back. Nights when the loneliness was so loud I could barely stand it. I'd scroll through old photos of us, her smile in the park, our road trip selfies, the day we got the keys to our house, and wonder if I'd made a mistake. My finger would hover over her name, my chest tight with longing. But I never pressed call. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Once trust is broken that completely, love alone can't fix it. The first few months alone were the hardest. I didn't know what to do with my evenings. The silence in my apartment felt oppressive. I'd open the fridge and realize I hadn't bought groceries, because I wasn't used to planning meals just for me. I'd lie in bed and instinctively reach for the empty space beside me, only to be reminded it was gone. But slowly, I adjusted. I started running again, something I'd given up after marriage because I was always too tired or too busy. The first run nearly killed me, my lungs burning, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: release. I stuck with it, and soon the rhythm of my feet on the pavement became a kind of therapy. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from. At first, it was awkward. I felt like the guy who had disappeared into coupledom and was now crawling back, broken. But they welcomed me. We spent weekends catching up, grabbing beers, going to concerts. For the first time in years, I wasn't saying let me check with Emily before making plans. I read more. I devoured books I'd left gathering dust on the shelf. I discovered podcasts, took long walks with headphones, let myself explore things just for me. I even signed up for a photography class, something Emily always encouraged me to do but I never made time for. Holding a camera felt strange at first, but eventually it became another form of expression, a way of seeing the world differently. Healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks. A random song on the radio could shatter me. A couple holding hands in a grocery store aisle could send me spiraling. I'd hear her laugh in my memory at the most unexpected times, and my chest would ache like an old wound reopening. Do I miss her? Sometimes. Do I still love her? In a way, yes. Love doesn't vanish just because it's betrayed. It lingers, like smoke after a fire. But I've learned that love isn't always enough. You can love someone deeply and still not be able to stay. What I've come to realize is that leaving wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about reclaiming myself. About realizing I had lost parts of who I was long before she cheated, pieces I kept giving away until there was almost nothing left. The biggest lesson I've taken from all of this is simple: don't ignore the signs. Don't silence your instincts just because you're afraid of what they'll tell you. I knew, deep down, long before I found the photos. I felt the distance. I saw the late-night texts, the distracted smiles, the sketches that no longer included me. But I convinced myself it was nothing, because the truth was too painful to face. If I could go back, I'd tell myself this: trust your gut. The longer you deny it, the more it destroys you. And above all, remember that you deserve honesty, even if the truth hurts. Emily swore she loved me. Maybe she did, in her own way. But love without loyalty, love without trust, it isn't really love at all. Now, almost a year later, I'm not fixed. Healing isn't about snapping your fingers and moving on, it's about learning to live with the scar. But I am better. Stronger. I know what I want, what I won't accept, and who I am when I'm not defined by someone else's choices. And if there's one thing I can promise myself moving forward, it's this: I'll never settle for a love that makes me feel less than whole again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories. Have you ever felt stuck in a relationship where leaving felt impossible? Share your thoughts or experiences below. I'd love to hear them.